Rebellion, Part 1, County Clare, Ireland, November 1847. The eviction had taken less than half an hour. It had taken generations to build the life that was lost. Ciarán Burke stood on the hill above what had once been his home. The roof was gone. The walls, which his grandfather had laid with his own hands, had been pushed inward until they resembled little more than a pile of broken limestone. The hearth still stood. It always seemed to survive, like some lonely monument to everything that had happened around it. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. There was no chimney, only grey sky where a roof had once been. He did not cry. There were no tears left. The first had been for his younger sister, Moira. She had been only 6. She stopped asking for food 3 days before she died. She simply slept more each day until one morning she did not wake. His mother followed before Christmas. His father lasted until February. The strongest man Ciarán had ever known had become so thin that his wedding ring slipped from his finger. He died apologizing. "I'm sorry, son." Those had been his last words. Sorry. As though failing to defeat the famine had been his fault. His older brother Sean survived another 2 months. The fever found him beside the road. Ciarán buried him beneath a hawthorn tree. There had been no priest, no coffin, only stones gathered from the field. He remembered every one he had carried. Now there was only Ciarán, 19 years old, the last Burke. He stayed upon the hill until sunset. There was nowhere else to go. No relatives, no money, no farm, no home, only roads. The first night he slept beneath a beech tree. The leaves had already fallen. The wind found him easily. He wrapped himself in an old blanket his mother had somehow managed to save during the eviction. It still smelled faintly of peat smoke. He held it close, not because it was warm, because it reminded him someone had once loved him. Winter became a succession of mornings. Wake, find water, find something to eat, keep walking, repeat. He learned which hedgerows held blackberries longest into autumn. He learned which streams still carried trout, though catching one with bare hands proved nearly impossible. He learned where farmers sometimes left turnips forgotten in frozen fields. He learned which woods held hazelnuts. Mostly he learned hunger, real hunger, not the feeling one has before supper, the kind that settles into the bones, the kind that makes a man dream of bread, that turns the smell of boiling potatoes drifting from distant cottages into almost unbearable temptation. Twice he stole. The first time was an apple. The second, half a loaf cooling upon a windowsill. He hated himself afterwards, not because he had stolen, because he had enjoyed eating it. Once an old widow caught him taking cabbage leaves from her garden. He froze. "I'm sorry." The woman looked at him. She saw the hollow cheeks, the torn boots, the eyes of someone who had forgotten what hope looks like. Instead of shouting, she disappeared inside. When she returned, she carried a bowl. It contained oat porridge, still warm. She handed it to him without a word, and he stared. "I've nothing to pay you." "I know." "Why?" She smiled sadly, "Because once someone fed my son." He never learned her name, but every winter afterward he remembered her. By December he had become almost invisible. Farmers scarcely noticed the thin young man walking the lanes. Children stared briefly before returning to their games. Dogs barked, then lost interest. He drifted through County Clare like a ghost. One parish today, another tomorrow, never staying long enough for anyone to ask questions. Loneliness proved worse than hunger. Hunger hurt the body. Loneliness slowly emptied the soul. There were days when he deliberately walked through villages simply to hear people talking. He would sit outside churches after Mass, not because he was especially devout, because families gathered there. Children laughed there. People called one another by name. He missed hearing his own. One icy January morning he awoke beneath a hedgerow covered in frost. His blanket had frozen stiff. He tried standing. His legs refused. He sat back down. For several minutes he simply watched his own breath. A strange thought entered his mind. Perhaps this is how it ends. Not dramatically, not heroically, just too tired to continue. He closed his eyes. His father's face appeared, not as he had died, as he had lived, laughing while stacking turf, whistling behind the horse, teaching Ciarán to cut hay. "Get up, lad." The voice felt so real that he opened his eyes. No one was there, only the wind. He smiled faintly. You never did know when to leave me alone. Slowly, painfully, he stood. Near midday he reached the outskirts of Ennis. A small crowd had gathered near the marketplace, more people than he had seen in months. Some carried green ribbons upon their coats. Others held newspapers. Men stood upon barrels, speaking excitedly. Ciarán paid little attention. Crowds often meant one thing. Someone was selling food. His stomach tightened. He moved closer. Perhaps, just perhaps, there might be a bowl of soup. He had no interest in politics, no interest in speeches, no interest in Ireland, not any more. Ireland had buried everyone he loved. All Ciarán Burke wanted was something to eat. He pushed gently through the gathering crowd, drawn not by the voices, but by the smell of fresh bread. Part 2. Ennis, County Clare, January 1848. Ciarán Burke smelled the bread before he saw it. Fresh, still warm. The aroma drifted through the cold January air, cutting through every other scent in the marketplace. His stomach tightened painfully. He'd not eaten since the previous morning. Even then it had been little more than a handful of turnips pulled from a frozen field. The smell seemed almost cruel. The crowd had gathered around a wooden wagon. From where Ciarán stood he could not yet hear the speaker. Only scattered words. Ireland. Rights. Our people. He scarcely listened. His eyes searched instead for the baskets. There, 3 of them. Covered with linen cloths. Bread. He edged quietly towards the rear of the gathering. No one noticed him. That suited him well. He had grown accustomed to becoming invisible. Invisible people attracted fewer questions. Invisible people were rarely chased away. A broad-shouldered man in his 30s noticed him lingering. You've come a fair distance. Ciarán nodded. The man smiled. You look frozen. I've known colder. The stranger studied him for a moment. Then he reached beneath the cloth covering one of the baskets. Without a word, he handed Ciarán half a loaf. For a second, Ciarán simply stared. Go on. The man smiled. It tastes no better if you keep looking at it. Ciarán almost snatched it from his hand. Instead, he forced himself to speak. Thank you. The man shrugged. We've all been hungry. Ciarán wanted to say, not like this. But the words never came. He tore off the first piece. The crust cracked. Steam still rose from the middle. He closed his eyes as he chewed. It had been months since he had eaten warm bread. For a few moments, nothing else existed. When he opened his eyes again, the crowd had become silent. Someone was speaking, not shouting, speaking, with a calm confidence that made people lean forward rather than step back. Ciarán looked toward the wagon. A tall gentleman stood upon it, well-dressed, his face serious rather than theatrical. This country, the man said, is not poor. He paused. It has been made poor. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ciarán frowned. He had never thought about the difference. The speaker continued, No nation should watch its children starve while food leaves its shores. A labourer near Ciarán muttered, God help us, he's right. Another man quietly removed his cap. Ciarán tore another piece from the loaf. He had heard angry speeches before. Most changed nothing. But this man spoke differently, not with rage, with sorrow. He asked the broad-shouldered stranger, Who's that? The man looked surprised. You don't know? Ciarán shook his head. That's William Smith O'Brien. The name meant nothing to him. O'Brien continued, They tell us patience. They tell us obedience. They tell us relief will come. His voice became firmer. My friends, how much more patient can a mother be while watching her child die? Silence. Not even the horses moved. Ciarán thought of Moira, 6 years old, too weak to cry during her final days. He looked down at the bread in his hands. Suddenly it no longer tasted quite the same. When the speech ended, the crowd applauded. Some cheered. Others simply stood quietly, as though uncertain what to do with the emotions they had just felt. People slowly began talking among themselves. Arguments, questions, plans, hopes. The marketplace seemed somehow different. Ciarán turned to leave. He had eaten. That had been his purpose, nothing more. Then the broad-shouldered man called after him. Wait. Ciarán stopped. You've not told me your name. No one had asked that question in months. He hesitated. Ciarán. And your family name? Burke. The man extended his hand. Patrick O'Connell. Ciarán stared. then awkwardly shook it. Patrick smiled. Now we're properly introduced. It was such an ordinary thing, yet Kieran suddenly realised it was the first friendly handshake he had received since before his father died. Have you somewhere to sleep? Patrick asked. Kieran hesitated. I manage. The answer told Patrick everything. He looked toward a nearby barn. A few of us are staying there tonight. I'm not looking for charity. Patrick laughed. Good. Neither are we offering it. What then? Company. That evening 6 young men sat around a small fire. Someone produced potatoes, another had onions, a third brought oatcakes. One man somehow found a little bacon. They pooled everything together. No one asked who had contributed the most. No one counted. 1 pot, 6 bowls, equal portions. Conversation flowed easily. Where are you from? Kilrush, Ennistimon, Carfin, Limerick. When Patrick asked Kieran the same question, he answered quietly, There isn't much left of where I'm from. No one pressed him. Each man understood too well. Later that night, as the fire burned low, one of the younger fellows unfolded a newspaper, The Nation. He began reading aloud poems, articles, accounts of meetings in Dublin, calls for reform. Some of it Kieran barely understood, but he listened. Not because of the politics, because the voices around him sounded alive. People argued, interrupted each other, laughed, disagreed. The barn echoed with conversation. For months his evenings had consisted only of wind moving through hedgerows. Now there were human voices. He had forgotten how comforting they could be. As the others settled down to sleep, Patrick spread another blanket across the straw. Here. Kieran looked at it. I told you, I'm not looking for charity. Patrick lay down beside the fire. It isn't charity. What is it? Patrick looked at him as though the answer were obvious. It's what friends do. Friends. The word lingered in Kieran's mind long after everyone else had fallen asleep. He was not certain he deserved friends any more. He'd become too accustomed to being alone. Too accustomed to believing that surviving meant trusting no one. Yet, as he listened to the quiet breathing of the 5 young men around him, he slept more peacefully than he had in nearly a year. The next morning, Patrick was already awake. He handed Kieran another piece of bread. We're drilling today. Drilling? Aye. Why? Patrick smiled. Come and see. Kieran accepted the bread. I know nothing about politics. Patrick shrugged. Neither did most of us. He started walking. After a few steps he looked back. You coming? Kieran looked toward the road leading west, toward another lonely day, another hedgerow, another night beneath the trees. Then he looked towards Patrick, toward laughter, toward warm food, toward people who already knew his name. He took a bite of the bread, then quietly followed. He still believed he was walking toward another meal. He did not yet realise he was walking toward the first place he had truly belonged since the Burke's cottage had fallen.